That again, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm delighted that you are here on the last day. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here for this whole week. We've been at this almost a week now here in Washington. For those who are joining us via C-SPAN around the country and for that matter around the world, welcome to what is the final day of this first ever, this historic gathering of young leaders, primarily from the African American community from most of these 50 states around the country. We are pleased to have these young people gather with us on the campus of Catholic University for what has been, again, almost a week-long conversation about leadership, what it is, and how this particular generation can discover, develop, and define their leadership potential and capacity for the coming months and years as they lead Black America through and into this millennium. We are gathered, as I said, on the campus of Catholic University and have about 1,000 young folk from all across the country who are with us. And today we are talking about a number of issues. This morning we're going to talk about Black youth and the media. This afternoon, I think also here on C-SPAN, we'll be talking about Black youth and the issue of affirmative action and its impact on their particular generation. Before I get right to the program here, let me say a brief word for those who've seen some of these sessions on TV or have been hearing some of them on radio. You're familiar with what this conference is, but for those who might be tuning in for the first time, let me share a brief word about what this conference is. Again, it is sponsored by our foundation, the Tavis Smiley Foundation. I am Tavis Smiley, and our work at the Tavis Smiley Foundation is geared toward doing three things, really, as it relates to youth leadership. Number one, for the past few years, we have been traveling the country, crisscrossing America, to big cities and small towns, trying to identify, number one, who this generation of young leaders is. Where are the young leaders in this generation? 100 years ago, this year, in fact, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote that classic book, The Souls of Black Folk. As we celebrate the centennial celebration of the publication of The Souls of Black Folk, we are reminded that in that wonderful piece of work, Du Bois talked about what he called the talented tenth and really challenged every generation of African Americans to discover and to identify that group of 10%, that talented tenth, who would step up and offer themselves up as servant leaders for their particular generation. And so for the last 3 years, we have been on a quest, again, in big cities and small towns all across this country, trying to identify who these young leaders are. Where are the young leaders in this particular generation? It is not lost on us that this generation represents the first generation of Black leaders in this country who will assume positions of leadership and responsibility and authority, but do so without having lived through the defining, certainly the seminal moment of Black struggle in this country, the Civil Rights era. It's not lost on us that just a few days from now, in this city of Washington, we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of the March on Washington. And so this generation represents the hope of Dr. King's dream. They have unlimited access and opportunity as never before in this place called America, but the challenges are greater now than they've ever been. And what happens to Black America, and I suggest to all of America, because when we make Black America better, we make all of America better. But the question is simply this: what happens to Black America and all of America long term with a new generation of African American leaders stepping up, who have the capacity, who have the potential, who have the requisite ambition to be servant leaders, but they just happen to be, through no fault of their own, of course, the first generation of Black folk to lead us in this country without having lived through the struggle that we celebrate in just a few days from now, 40 years after the March on Washington. We believe it is a provocative question, a critical question, and one that needs to be addressed. And so we started a few years ago trying, one, to identify who these young leaders are. Our work focuses specifically on the age group of 13 to 18. Of course, some of these folk now are 20, 21 in their third and fourth year and final year of college, so we're up to 21 years of age roughly. But this audience, about 1,000 young folk, is 13 to 21 in age, and so we're pleased to have them here, one, and we think we've done a pretty good job of identifying who the next generation of leaders are. You think we've done a good job finding you? So that's the first thing we've done, is to identify who these young leaders are, and as evidenced by their presence here for the last week, we know who they are. we can now track them. We have them in a database. The second thing we've tried to do after identifying these young people is to put them through a leadership training, a leadership development program. That program is called Youth to Leaders. Hence, this is the first ever national summit of youth to leaders who've gone through this program, been exposed to our work all across America. So one, we've identified them. Two, many of them have already gone through a youth to leaders development program. And thirdly, we thought it just made good sense to bring all these young folk together, to give them a chance to be exposed to each other, to enlighten, to encourage, to empower each other, to dialogue and discourse, to agree, to disagree with each other, but to establish the relationships and the bonds and associations and friendships and strategic alliances to network with each other. We are determined that out of this conference, a young Malcolm will have met a young Martin, that a young Ida B. Wells will have met a young Harriet Tubman, that a young Thurgood Marshall will have met a young Asa Philip Randolph, that a young Dorothy Height will have met a young Rosa Parks. That's what this conference is all about. And we are now in the final day of this conference. It's been a great week here in Washington, talking and engaging and, quite frankly, listening to, most importantly, these young people as we have dialogued and not so much monologued about the leadership challenges facing this particular generation. And so we've discussed all kinds of topics over the last few days here at this National Leadership Conference. Today, as I said a moment ago, there are a couple of major topics we're going to tackle. This morning, we want to talk about the intersection of black youth and the media. I've often said that when you talk about young black men in particular, you see black men on television in one of two positions, one of two roles you see them starring in: handcuffs in the front or the handcuffs in the back. What is it about this particular generation that has made their presence in the media so contrary to what this generation really represents? What is it about the intersection between black folk and the media that presents an image that is antithetical to what they are all about, what they are attempting to do, and what is against, obviously, again, their best interest? And so we're here today to talk about the intersection of black youth and the media, but that raises all sorts of questions: social questions, economic questions, political questions. And so we are pleased today to have a conversation that features two wonderful presenters. We promised these young folk when they came to Washington that we would do our level best to expose them to the best and brightest that black America has to offer. And I don't have the time now to run the list of all of those great men and women who've come through this conference to speak to these young people, to engage them in dialogue and discourse about the issues that matter to them. But trust me when I tell you that everybody who's anybody making a contribution to black America has come through this conference, and we've been delighted to have them. This morning is no different. We're going to bring two speakers to the podium, one for a presentation first, the second for his presentation, and then they will be joined on this panel that we're going to have engaging these young people by a young person from this group. Will join these two speakers on a panel here so that we can have some dialogue directly with the audience of young people who you see sitting before me. It is my pleasure to expose these young people to one who they may have heard of, one who I know they read, but have never had a chance to meet or to dialogue with. His impact on the social discourse, the political discourse, the economic discourse in this country is growing every single day. He is a syndicated cartoonist. His strip is read in 300, 400. The number keeps growing so fast, I've lost count. But hundreds of newspapers across this country every single day. I read his strip this morning in the Washington Post, and it's funny. It's a J-Lo thing. You got to read the Boondocks, today's cartoon strip in the Boondocks, and see the conversation between Huey and Riley. It's much funnier when you read it than when I tell you, so I'll stop there. But it's funny. Huey and Riley have a fascinating conversation and somehow intersect gay marriage and J-Lo. You got to read this to understand. I know I've confused you now, but anyway, read the Boondocks today to see what Huey and Riley are saying about the intersection of those issues. But every day, with two young male African-American characters, namely Huey and Riley, this particular syndicated cartoonist has a lot to say about the issues that this generation is being forced to grapple with. He's a graduate of the University of Maryland, and as I said earlier, has a voice every day that's being heard and offering a perspective on the pages of our newspapers that has never been there before. He's done something historic. I mentioned to these young people, mentioned to you, I guess yesterday or the day before, that there are two kinds of folk in the world. Originals and repeaters. You don't want to be a repeater. Folk who don't have an original thought of their own. All they do is go through life repeating stuff they've read, repeating stuff they've heard. But you have to be an original thinker, and you have to be a person who thinks critically. He does this every day, and he makes us laugh in the process. I've always believed if you can get folk to laugh, then you can get folk to listen. And there's no better example that I am aware of a person who gets us to laugh and to listen every single day in newspapers all around this country and indeed around the world. And he is part of the best and brightest that Black America has ever produced. Please welcome the creator of the Boondocks, Aaron McGruder.
Tavis, thanks. He's very kind. Thank you to all of you for being here. Thanks to the audience for C-SPAN. I've got my phone here to keep track of time, so if it goes off, I'm not trying to be, not trying to be a baller. I'm just trying to keep track of the time. So today we're talking about redefining the image, which, is comforting to me because I think oftentimes when we start to examine politics, in particular, public policy, what's going on in the world, sometimes those of us who lean towards the political left fail to understand the importance of image. This is a problem which costs us a great deal, both in terms of money, our cultural situation, and our political situation. I don't know how important it was decades past, before my time and before your time. But what people consistently underestimate today is how the nature of mass media has transformed society. 10 people control 90% of everything you see, read, and hear in this country. 10 people. And they want to tell you that Cuba has state-run media. 10 people. Who are those 10 people? Well, you can look them up. They're not hard to find. That, in and of itself, is problematic. When you consider that these 10 people all need permission from the U.S. government in order to have licenses, in order to buy other corporations, in order to do all the nefarious things they like to do, then you really understand what state-run media is. If Martin Luther King were alive today and he were in his 20s, nobody would know who he was because he would never get on TV. That's the difference between 2003 and 1953 or 1963. We live in a completely different era where information is more tightly controlled than it has ever been in the history of this country. What that really means is somebody can tell you black is white and night is day, and you will believe it. And not only that, the bigger the lie, the more likely you are to believe it. They told you for how many months that the attacks on New York and the Pentagon were the responsibility of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. They told you that over and over and over and over again. And you know what? You believed it. Until they wanted to invade Iraq. Then they told you it was Saddam who did it. They just told you a completely different thing. And you know what? Nobody said anything. Everyone, oh, okay, sure. Now, you guys are smart, so I know some of y'all had to be asking questions. Some of y'all had to go, oh, this ain't sitting right. But the vast majority of Americans believed it. How many of y'all are old enough to remember, well, I guess none of you are old enough to remember Iran-Contra. I'm barely old enough to remember Iran-Contra. But I won't get into that. There is such a limited amount of truth available for you to acquire, to digest, and to apply. This is not an accident, and it's not just a conspiracy against black people. This is the world in which you live today. As leaders, the most important thing that you have to remember is that the nature of power changes. These people who run the world, they may not be good people. In fact, they're really, really bad people. But they're not stupid people. Rarely do they make the same mistakes twice. Meaning, whatever worked before, whatever strategies, whatever tactics, whatever plans were really successful 30, 40 years ago, they're not going to work anymore. They've learned those lessons. We're coming up on the anniversary of the March on Washington. One of the most memorable moments in American history, something that has ingrained itself in all of American culture, because we can look, we can remember all of us seeing the footage of all those people, Martin Luther King, the speech, the singing, all that stuff. It was a big deal. Then we had the Million Man March, 1995. We've seen that. That was the response. It wasn't that big a deal. It was a big deal for like a week. Y'all are probably too young to remember that, but you know, we all went, we felt good. It was like a moment. But there was something that felt a little old. And then there was a Million Mom March and a Million Black Women. There's been like 500,000 people marches since then. To the point that when we're on the verge of the Iraq War, no, actually after the Iraq War started, some 400,000 people march in New York City. And they don't even get on the news. This is what I mean when I say that the nature of power has changed. The Civil Rights Movement, what was so amazing about it was that there was a brand new tactic. Mass media was new. Television was new. And they realized that they could use this new thing to their advantage. That they would be showing people the oppression that black Americans face, and it would be beamed across the world. And it would be the first time these images were being seen in this nature. And they used it masterfully, and it worked wonderfully. But in 2003, nobody cares about your march and your picket sign. And even if they did, they'll never know what happened. Because you won't get on the news. This is what image is. This is what we're talking about. Wresting control of information from those that have it and those that don't want to be honest. Those that want to use that information to put a stranglehold on the entire planet. So those same people who are, you know, flipping through and they're watching Fox News and they're watching CNN and they're watching MSNBC and they're being told how popular the president is and all of that stuff. Then they flip a few channels over to BET and they watch You Act Like Idiots. And that's all they see. They only see you acting like idiots. And you can get mad if you want. You can go, oh, that's the media. Okay. Yeah, it's the media, but they're still watching you act like idiots. And every week there's somebody new on television acting like an idiot. And they look like you, and they dress like you, and they talk like you. Are y'all mad at that? But are you really mad? And if you are mad, the question becomes, what do you do about it? The interesting thing when you talk about the media and the media and the media and the media and the media, and they making us look bad. Well, one, please take responsibility for yourself, because, you know, those are real black people up there looking bad. But two, It's really good to have these discussions of the media's doing this, the media's doing that. Well, guess what? Media's been doing the same thing for a minute, and they're going to keep doing it. So now that we've established that, we actually have to get into the very tough and unpleasant discussion of how to actually change the media. To that, you have to understand how the media works. You have to understand who these companies are that control everything you see and hear and read. You got to know about Viacom. You got to know about Sony. You got to know about News Corp, Disney, Bob Johnson. You have to understand the system that produces the images that you see. Many of us like to think it's a bunch of white people sitting around in a smoky room going, I wonder how to make black people look bad. I moved out to Hollywood about 4 years ago. And let me tell you, I wish it were that simple. But it is nowhere near that simple. The first thing to remember is that what drives this country is money and profit. Generally, most things that are going down today are going down because of money and profit. Absolutely. The wars, the peace, stocks, and every single TV show you watch. Believe me, what you see on television when you turn on CNN and you turn on MSNBC, that's entertainment. News is what people try to suppress. News is what they do not want you to know. What you're seeing is fun and games. What you're seeing is what's put out there to keep you stupid. Now, I know that sounds really conspiratorial and all of that stuff, but let me tell you, I've been in Hollywood for 4 years now. I've been working in the newspaper industry for a bit longer. Information is controlled, absolutely on every level. And then I have these discussions and people go, oh, right. Like the White House is really calling people, telling newspapers, don't run this story. They are. The White House calls newspapers, the White House calls musicians. Are you going to put a video out? Nah, we don't think you should do that. Don't get it twisted. It's that controlled. Everything you see is there because someone wants you to see it. So you figure out how the system works, and then you figure out, well, what's motivating the people behind the system? Why do they want you to see certain things? Why do they want black people looking silly? Well, it's simple. I mean, how many people have seen The Matrix? How many people have seen the second Matrix? Well, you got to see the second Matrix. Dr. West is in the second Matrix. The point is that struggles used to be organized and planned a bit differently. You used to be able to go, and there were communities, there were institutions in the community. People would go to a church, or they would go someplace, they would organize, they would meet, the movement would build, the ideology would spread, and action would take place. Why doesn't that happen now? Because everyone's getting their information from mass media. 90%, it's coming from there. So if it's not on TV, it doesn't exist. It's irrelevant. I can't knock on your door and say, brother, sister, join the revolution. You will laugh at me. You're like, what the hell are you thinking? I'm not joining anything. Who are you? I'm calling the police. I was having an argument with some young people in Cuba about this very thing. Why is there no revolution in the United States? Why is there no armed revolution like we had in Cuba? Simple. Americans have television and drugs. We're a little comfortable. Actually, you know what? We're really comfortable. And black people, we have it bad, and we somewhat self-aware, but we don't have it so bad that we're ready to pick up a gun. We don't even have it so bad that we're ready to go to jail. I only have 15 minutes. There's a lot to talk about here. But if nothing else, take away that strategy at this point is critical. the eyes on the prize routine ain't gonna work. Times have changed. One must move on. There is a very close similarity between Hollywood and politics. The right wing knows it, the left wing does not. That's why we run people like Al Gore and Ralph Nader for president. And I voted for Ralph Nader. Because we don't understand that you got to be a movie star in order to be elected president. Literally. And now you got to be a movie star to be elected governor of California. Ralph Nader is not the most charismatic guy. But you know what? Neither was Bush the first. How many people remember the first Bush? There we go. Well, Bush number one was this nerdy guy that nobody liked. He didn't have any charisma. He had a lot of power. But he really wasn't very photogenic. He just wasn't that guy. So they said, okay, we're going to stick you with Reagan. Reagan was a movie star. Everybody liked Reagan, at least everybody white. Reagan made white people feel good. Bush, nobody really cared about him. But he knew that the only way he was going to get to the White House was behind Reagan. Maybe it's a coincidence that right after he got in office, somebody tried to kill Reagan. I don't know. That would be a conspiracy. I don't get into conspiracy theories. But the point is that Ralph Nader does not need to be running for president. And thankfully this year he's not. Why? Image. Be smart enough to understand that it's image. If you're Ralph Nader, you don't run for president. Ralph Nader's the nerdy guy from high school you wouldn't hang out with. That's who Ralph Nader is. If you're Ralph Nader, you find a really good-looking guy who's articulate and handsome, and you tell him what to say. And he gets elected president. That's strategy. That's just taking that extra step. Like, you know what? Is it superficial? Yes. Is it silly? Yes. But it matters. I'm going to say this here because it's so important. Al Sharpton's haircut matters. It matters. Because he's running for president. It matters. Should it matter? No. But you know what? It does. That's image. Don't be naive about the power of mass media and the power of image. It controls more than you think. I sell angry black politics to 20 million white people a day. How do I do it? Because they're cute. That's it. That's the long and the short of it. If I drew characters that actually look like Huey P. Newton and Louis Farrakhan, I would be drawing this strip in my basement. Nobody would have ever seen it. I said, wow, I wonder what happens if you just take the politics that mainstream America hates and put it in a really cute package. How do they handle it? Hey, I'm seen by 30 million people on Sunday alone. Image. We often complain about black culture, how negative it is. We talk about rappers. We talk about, all the stuff when we talk about the objectification of women. We talk about the nihilism. We talk about all of this stuff. And these are all valid critiques. But one thing I know from the few rappers I do know, a lot of these guys who may not be the most positive guys, they are very serious about the business of entertainment in a way that a lot of the goody guys are not. Understand that no matter what message you have, you better be captivating your audience first, or nobody's going to listen. When I was in high school, 1988 to 1992, roughly, hip-hop wasn't where it is today. It wasn't bitches, it wasn't hoes. There was a lot of niggas, but, the self-destructive nature of where hip-hop is today, it wasn't there. It was actually cool then to be smart. There was like a sort of pro-black nationalism, Pan-Africanism thing happening in the culture around that time. And it was cool. Yeah, it was a fad, and like every fad, it passed. But it was cool in that moment in time to be a conscious black individual. Why? Because these people were also serious about the business of making good music, of being entertaining. Yes, we have problems with the gangster rappers of the world. Yes, we can make valid intellectual critiques of what they do. But you know what? They make hits. The Black Eyed Peas are corny. No, let's just be honest. They're corny. And look, I really like the fact that they don't talk about all the things. They don't talk about ICE, and they don't talk about, Bentleys and all. But you know what? I don't listen to them because they're corny. And you cannot move black people if you're corny. Black people are not checking for you if you're corny. Is that right? No. Is it fair? No. Is it kind of silly and superficial? Maybe. But tough. That's the world you live. It's okay to be positive, but still be good. We face this question a lot when you're in Hollywood. Positive black entertainment. And I'm all for positive black entertainment. But again, don't be boring, don't be corny. Find out how to reach your audience and reach them. That's the sophistication that is needed. There's a million black people standing around on a street corner talking politics, and nobody's listening. Nobody. There's a bunch of people with websites writing about conspiracies and writing about what black people need to do. It doesn't matter. The rules have changed. You want to have an impact? Reach people. You want to reach people? It is not easy, but you better figure out a way to do it. And if that means figuring out a way to get into government and breaking these monopolies so that there's actually competition, great. If that means starting a black network to compete with BET and get in 50, 60 million homes, great. But you better think of something. Because pretty soon the 90% that they control is going to be 95, and then it's going to be 99. The type of media control that we're facing now, the impact is staggering on us, black people. We really like to think of ourselves as the most creative geniuses on the planet, right? What the hell is so creative about 13 years of gangster rap? Nothing in rap music has changed in about 13 years. And we're supposed to be so brilliant. We're supposed to be, we feel ourselves on that. Everyone follows us. Yeah, they following us straight to hell. For real. You don't have the luxury of mistakes. Don't have it. Everything you do has to be right. Everything. Now, when it is right, people are so amazed because the expectations of you are so low that you will really be able to achieve amazing things just by having your stuff together. Show up on time, and people are astounded. They are astounded. Should the expectations of black America be so low? No. Is it fair? No. Is it right? No. But that's what it is. That's image. Right now, our image is that of lazy, stupid people that never show up on time. So you know what? Show up on time. Break the mold. Understand not only what the world thinks of you, understand what you think of yourself, and understand who's controlling these images. When I was in high school, Queen Latifah was a black revolutionary. Now she's, bringing down the house. That's a big difference. Now, the Queen Latifah, who was a black revolutionary, was broke. Bringing down the house, Queen Latifah is rich. They call her Dana now. I really want you guys to understand that time is running out. And a lot of black people say that, but for real. Part of why the civil rights movement has been so successful, and part of why those who have come after in terms of our leadership have been able to maintain a presence, is that black people have always had a certain amount of moral currency that we have been using. And let me be the first to tell you, that's used up. White America has been watching us act like fools for a long enough time where any sympathy they may have had to our plight is completely gone. You're approaching a country that, forget hating black people or not hating black people, they just don't care. You can be talking about affirmative action, they can be like, I don't care. It literally is of no importance to me. I don't care about slavery. I don't care about segregation. I don't care about you. I don't care how many of you all go to jail. I don't care at all, because I'm broke. You can't be the proud, noble fighter when every single time someone sees a person that looks like you on television, they're acting like a damn fool. How would they know? How would they know you're not a damn fool? You think they're going to talk to you? Yeah, right. This is what we're facing. Now, this was not a very motivational speech because I'm not a motivational speaker. I got to be honest. So wait. That don't matter to me. I'm a critic. That's what I do for a living. I'm not here to tell you you can do it because you know what? Maybe you just can't do it. I'm going to be real. I'm going to be real. I hope you can do it. I hope to God you can do it. You better do it. Because if you don't, will you suffer? Yeah. But your kids are going to catch hell. You guys are it. Don't think about Jesse. Don't think about Al. They will not be there. And quietly, let me stop. It's on you. This is about as uplifting as I get. It's on you. It's going to be hard. You better do it. And if you don't, I'm moving to Cuba. Thank you very much.
Y'all give Aaron McGruder some love up in here. Now, for those, as I said earlier, what we've attempted to do in this conference before we bring out our next speaker, who you do not want to miss, As I said earlier, we have been trying, as you know, young people, over the course of this last week to expose you to the best and brightest that Black America has to offer. And as I said a moment ago, Aaron is among the best and brightest. I have said many, many times that you, for me, are like Kodak film. All you need is a little exposure. And I'm sure that once you get the exposure, that the picture that's going to develop of your future is going to be a beautiful picture. Aaron was right, and I'm glad he kept it real, as y'all like to say. I'm glad that he told you at the end that he wasn't a motivational speaker, and it wasn't a motivational speech, but it was real, and if you believe that, give Aaron some love. He kept it real. And that is precisely what your generation says it values. And because you started that, keep it real, and you say you value that, I hope that you appreciate his presentation. Trust me, if you don't now, you will in the coming months and years. But in the interim, when you get back home, if you have never heard of Aaron McGruder and never heard of the Boondocks, when you get home tomorrow, I want you to start reading every day. What? That wasn't loud enough. What? One more time. Read the Boondocks every day. Huey and Riley are funny characters, but they're giving a message every single day. And I want you to start reading. There you go, when you get home tomorrow. Aaron, thank you. Aaron's going to join us here in a little while on this panel with some young people from this audience, along with our next speaker for some conversation with this audience. It occurred to me that while Aaron was speaking, talking so much and so forcefully and so poignantly about image and how important the image of you is, and how unfortunate it is that the image that that America rather has of you, how unfortunate it is that the image that America has of you is what it is. And there are a lot of folk to blame for that, but he talked about the media's role in that process, and I would be remiss if I did not ask you, young people, to thank one more time for allowing your image to be redefined on national television, C-SPAN, for covering this session. C-SPAN, we thank you, we appreciate you for helping these young people redefine the image that America has of them. I could tell you that his mama was a school teacher. I could tell you that Malcolm X was right when he said that education is our passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. His mama understood that and instilled in him, along with his father, but his mother was an educator, instilled in him a lifelong love of learning. Miss Irene B. West in Sacramento, California, instilled in her son a lifelong love of learning. That learning has now, over the years, metamorphosized into leading. He leads as an academic at the greatest institutions in this country. He was educated initially as an undergraduate at Harvard. I love this. I love trivia. I'm a trivia kind of buff. So just a little trivia for you. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter, but it's interesting to me. All the brothers certainly know. How many brothers love football? Love football. The host of Fox NFL Sunday, the brother, what's his name? JB. We all love JB, right? Give JB some love. We all love JB. JB went to Harvard, played basketball at Harvard. JB and this cat were roommates years ago at Harvard. Kind of interesting trivia. They were roommates as undergraduates at Harvard. He is now a professor at Princeton, having taught at Harvard up until a year ago. He's now a professor at Princeton. He's written all kinds of books. One of his bestsellers, the one that I recommend, write this down, add this to your reading list. As you know, over the course of the week, we've been giving you books, recommended reading when you get back home. Some of these books we've been distributing to you while you're here. Other books we've asked you to write down to get when you get back home to continue to grow your leadership capacity and potential. Write down this title, Race Matters. Race Matters. I've seen a couple of people I see holding up the book right now, brought it with them. A couple of people I saw walk over to Dr. West before he came out and ask him to sign their copy of his book. So some of you are already familiar with Race Matters, have already read it, and indeed have gotten Dr. West to sign your copies today. But get that book, Race Matters, when you get home by our speaker today. He doesn't just write books. He doesn't just teach. He's a performance artist as well. A couple years ago, he put out a CD, spoken word. He loves the art form. How many people love spoken word? He loves spoken word, Deaf Poetry Jam, and all that good stuff. He loves spoken word and put out a CD a couple of years ago called Sketches of My Culture. So if you're into spoken word and you want to hear his CD, it's called Sketches of My Culture, speaking directly with a message of enlightenment and empowerment to your generation on this CD. You heard Aaron McGruder reference the fact that he is in the Matrix Reloaded. So he understands how to bridge this intergenerational gap. So for those who have seen the Matrix Reloaded, he played the role of Counselor West at the head of the big table, Counselor West in the Matrix Reloaded. I've said all that because I think all that's significant for you to know a little bit about who he is and how fortunate you are to have him address you today. But let me close with this before I bring him to the podium. And I mean this sincerely. I started earlier today suggesting to you or reminding you that 100 years ago this year, W.E.B. Du Bois, the world's first recognized black intellectual, wrote the book, The Souls of Black Folk. We celebrate 100 years later. It is just as poignant and provocative and relevant today as it was 100 years ago when he wrote it. Obviously, none of us in this room is ever going to meet W.E.B. Du Bois. Obviously, none of us in this room will ever be in the same room with a W.E.B. Du Bois. Obviously, none of us in this room will ever have direct access, an opportunity to dialogue and engage W.E.B. Du Bois. But when I tell you, as I said the other night, that life is not so much made up of the breaths that we take, but of the moments that take our breath away, I want you, and you will, I don't have to ask you to, trust me, you will, for the rest of your life, remember and value and appreciate this moment. And you'll appreciate it because you will come to understand that this black intellectual is the Du Bois of our time. And years from now, you are going to be able, to Aaron's point, to tell your kids and your grandkids that one day in August, on the eve of the 40th anniversary of the March on Washington, you were in D.C. in a room with Princeton professor. Please show some love to Cornel West.
Oh, what a blessing to be here. Let's give Brother Tavis Smiley a hand. Nothing like him in his generation. Nothing like him in his generation. Not only constituting this gathering, but in so many other contexts. He plays such an important role, and he keeps such a gentle spirit. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. Tavis Smiley is a paradigm. He's a model in so many ways. And I hope that each and every one of you are inspired, not simply by what he's doing, but what he also represents. If we're talking about redefining image and preparing young black folk for leadership, we're talking about approaching it with a certain kind of spirit. Now, I was blessed this morning to meet Brother Jonathan Quarles and Sister Alicia Wyman and Sister Hosanna Turner. Let's give all three of them a hand. They're young leaders, co-chair and help bringing us together, but they're approaching it a certain kind of spirit. We heard it with Brother Aaron McGruder. He's a historic figure. Now, what do I mean by certain spirit? I mean that they decided early on, and I want each and every one of you to decide right now to aspire to greatness. Aspire to greatness. Say that with me. I aspire to greatness. Say it louder than that.
I aspire to greatness.
Why? Because you come out of a great tradition. A tradition of struggle, of Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and Ida B. Wells Barnett and A. Philip Randolph and Ella Baker and Curtis Mayfield and Aretha Franklin and Tupac Shakur. I'm talking about greatness. I met Tupac when he was 10 years old in Reverend Daltrey's church, House of the Lord Pentecostal Church, where I used to lecture every Wednesday, where his blessed Mother Afeni would bring him, and he'd sit right on the front row and watch me run my mouth. And you know what I told that brother? Aspire to greatness. Now, greatness is different than success. I'm not telling you to be successful. A whole lot of folks successful, not too great. A whole lot of folk have public notoriety, not too great. First sign of greatness, especially as a young person, is self-respect, self-confidence, and self-love. And the benchmark of greatness, you read it in the New Testament. He or she who was great among you will be your what? Your servant. It's measured in the form of service. Are you willing to serve? Are you prepared to serve? So I want to begin a brief reflection on you aspiring to greatness, because it's not a plaything. Much depends on whether you're able to achieve a certain level of greatness in the form of service to others. That's why you've been selected. Why? Because you're disciplined. You've got tremendous talent, and you have great energy. And the question will be, can you exemplify and enact this aspiration to greatness? And let's begin first with Socrates. Why do we begin with Socrates? You all know who Socrates was. You read Plato's text. Socrates had big lips, flat nose, huge neck, pot belly, walked around with one shoe. Remind you a little bit of John Coltrane on the stage sometime, playing the saxophone with one shoe. But what was Socrates about? Aspiring to greatness in the form of what? Saying the unexamined life is not worth living. Let me say that again. The unexamined life is not worth living, which means the examined life is painful. The first step in your attempt to aspire to greatness is to muster the courage to think critically for yourself, because the unexamined life is not worth living. What Socrates called parrhesia, frank speech, plain speech. The best of hip-hop, the best of the rap musicians, and I'm thinking of Chuck D, I'm thinking of Lauryn Hill, you see. I'm thinking of Tupac, I'm thinking of those rap artists and hip-hop figures who exercise frank and plain speech in the form of eloquence, and eloquence is wisdom speaking. They muster the courage to think critically. Part of the challenge of not just the younger generation, but all of us, is that we're locked into too much conformity, too much complacency, and both are species of cowardice. Folk play hating on you, resentful, envy, jealousy. That's rooted in insecurity. That's rooted in cowardice. We're talking about courage. For those like yourselves who aspire to greatness, the first step is to try to muster courage to do what? To think for yourself. Resist peer pressure. Resist those attempts to somehow make you mainstream rather than cutting against the grain. There's no such thing as aspiring to greatness and being a conformist. You must be a non-conformist. I love Brother George Clinton when he used to say, you know, deep down all of us have to recognize that we just featherless, two-legged, linguistically conscious creatures born between urine and feces who emerge from the funk. Emerge from the funk. And the question is whether we're going to cut up against the grain in the short amount of time that we are here. Because you might be young now, but the time passes quickly. The old folk used to say in my Baptist church, Shiloh Baptist Church, brothers, there's an old man inside of you on his way to your house. Sisters, there's an old woman inside of you on her way to your house. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, she will arrive. Because you're a being in time. You emerge out of the love push of mom, the womb, and you're on your way to the tomb. You shall soon be the culinary delight of terrestrial worms. I know that's not edifying in the morning. But that's what happens to your body. You're not here that long. And the question becomes, what are you going to do in the meantime, in the short time that you have? What kind of person are you going to be? Are you going to aspire to greatness in the form of what? Mustering the courage to think critically for serving others. Part of the problem right now, not just in black America, part of the problem of America, we're losing ideals of greatness owing to a market-driven culture that's all about success. And being preoccupied with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught in one's attempt to be successful. But I come to you this morning as one who was produced by a tradition of four mothers and four fathers that said, if we do not aspire to greatness, there will be no high quality leadership, and those persons who are caught will perish. Their souls will perish, their lives will perish. And when Du Bois wrote in 1903 in Souls of Black Folk that he was looking for a slice of young black people who were willing to be great, he meant for you to be great servants so that you could prepare yourself. You would put on the whole armor of God in Ephesians 6:10 through 15. To be prepared for a battle, a psychic battle, a spiritual battle, a political battle, an economic battle. And that's why I hope out of some of you wonderfully brilliant folk, we get some great intellectuals who are serious about the life of the mind and understand the life of the mind, not only having intrinsic joys and pleasures, but also a weapon in struggle for freedom. I hope we get some great artists like Brother McGruder. I hope we get some great sculptors, some great pharmacists, some great doctors, some great lawyers, great politicians. Well, that's almost a contradiction in terms these days, though, isn't it? But we need great politicians, all genders, all colors. And it may sound distant to you now, but it has everything to do with those folk who came before you, who make you who you are because they have given you at their best great love and care and attention. How many would take a bullet for their mother? Raise your hand. Oh, I'd love to see the hand. Give yourselves a hand. That's serious. Why would you take a bullet for your mother? Why would I take a bullet for my mother? Because of great love. Great love. And to connect the Socratic, Socrates, with the prophetic, a legacy of love, is so crucial. One of the problems among young black people these days is that you all have not received enough love, enough care, enough attention. The older generation has been too self-indulgent, been too narcissistic, concerned with careers rather than reaching out and providing webs of care for you, so you end up being spiritually neglected and wondering whether enough people love me and care for me or concerned about me and keeping track of me. That's why this foundation is so very important. Because once you come to this foundation, Brother Tavis Smiley's telling you, I'm going to keep track of you from now on no matter what you do. Because you are that important. And you see, when I was coming along 30 years ago, I had so many folk keeping track of me, I had to hide sometimes. The preacher, the coach, the deaconess, my brother, my mother, my father, my uncle, my aunt, they were keeping track of me. These days, you all don't have enough folk keeping track of you. You don't have enough folk keeping track of you. And the result is what? We got a love deficit. Now, how does a people who have been so hated as black people, so haunted as black people, come to terms with also not having enough love? It takes the form of self-destruction and self-violation, treating each other in a demeaning way, degrading each other. And that N-word that's used all the time, we tend to make fun about it, but it's got something else going on too. Because if you think lowly of yourself, then it's easy to think lowly of people who look like you. And you can put them down. You can blow them away. You can treat your women like somehow they're less than human, just an object of your consumption, and treat your man as just a vehicle for your living large. No people can survive with that low level of aspiration. We're aspiring to greatness. And that's why the love is so very important. How many of y'all have heard John Coltrane's "The Love Supreme"? Yes. And more of you plan to listen to it, I hope. How many of you read Toni Morrison's "Beloved"? How many of you listened last night to R. Kelly's "Step in the Name of Love"? Oh, yeah. R. Kelly got issues now, but he's a talented brother. Oh, yes, he's a talented brother. We need to criticize all behavior that demeans anybody. But we also need to affirm genius. R. Kelly's a complicated brother. He deserves serious criticism. I got a daughter. I don't want her to become involved in certain kind of activity. But I also love his music. See, "Step in the Name of Love" gets me moving. Oh, yeah. Because what R. Kelly is articulating is not just something individual and personal. He knows that love is a way of life. It's a culture. He says it's something you have to live and breathe, especially if you come from a people who are so hungry for love because of the self-demeaning and the white supremacist bombardment coming at us. And part of the problem in black people has always been we do not love ourselves enough. It's a deep problem. Believe we have the wrong hair, lips and hips and nose and skin texture, pigmentation. And you can love yourself and love white brothers and yellow sisters and red brothers and brown sisters, but you've got to love yourself. That's where your self-confidence comes from. That's the basis of your aspiration to greatness, but it has to spill over, so it's just not deifying yourself, but rather putting yourself on the same human level so that you can be great, a better servant, because you've prepared yourself. I cannot overemphasize this because I get excited. I get inspired when I see so many talented, disciplined young folk like yourself. I just turned 50. I don't really look it though, do I? I just turned 50. And I'm blessed to be alive, right? I had cancer a few years ago, didn't know I was going to make it or not. So to be able to have this chance to spend this quality time with you, and I hope and pray that each and every one of you are serious about that promise of aspiring to greatness. And to be great doesn't mean that you're better than other people. It means that you have a calling to serve other people. That you can make a fundamental difference, not just in your life and the life of others. That's why Socrates, that's why Jesus, and the best the prophetic Judaic tradition, the best of the prophetic Islamic tradition, make a difference. A courage to think for oneself and the courage to love in such a way that you're willing to live and maybe even die for other people, beginning with mama. Last but not least, I'm going to bring this to a close. We have a good time for dialogue. You all have been very patient, and I appreciate it. There is the issue of democracy. The Socratic, the prophetic, and the democratic. And democracy is about what? It's about what Sly Stone called everyday people. Y'all know who Sly Stone is? All right. James Cleveland, call them ordinary people. Y'all know the great James Cleveland? Absolutely. The lives of everyday people, the lives of ordinary people have dignity. What's the name of the Negro National Anthem? Lift every voice. The voices of ordinary people, the voices of everyday people must be lifted in such a way that they're heard in shaping the destiny of the nation. that they're heard in the decision-making processes of institutions that guide and regulate our lives. Well, we're in a crisis right now in America because America is an empire with tentacles around the world, with recent invasion of Iraq and occupation of Iraq. It's an empire, and there's a deep tension between an empire and a democracy. And part of your challenge in this 21st century, in your aspiration to greatness, is not only to learn to think critically for yourself, is not only to learn to love yourself and others in such a way that you're willing to serve them in a significant manner, but it's also to fight for democracy against empire, against imperial power. And it seems like an abstraction, but it's not at all. How many have friends in the Army right now? Look at how all the black folk got friends in the Army. The U.S. Army is a working class and lower middle class army. It is a major extension of the American empire. The well-to-do don't have large numbers of relatives in the Army. It's my cousins, friends in the Army. And if not there, in the prisons, and if not there, here on C-SPAN, working hard, being disciplined and highly talented. And we don't have enough of the images of what you all are doing in the public realm to see young black folk who themselves are willing to dedicate themselves to greatness such that they're quality servants and fighting for democracy against the worst of the American empire, which is arrogance, hubris, manipulating folk, exploiting people's labor, concerned fundamentally with profits, the way Brother McGruder was talking with such insight and courage. I know that's a whole lot to put on you. And I believe that you do have what it takes. I believe that you can meet the challenge, but only after tremendous work, tears, sweat, and a little fun. Thank you all so very much. Let's have a good dialogue on these issues that we're dealing with, and stay strong in what you're doing. Stay strong in what you're doing.
I know you can do better than that for Professor Cornel West. Aaron McGruder join us now on the panel on the end. Please say hello to a member of the National Planning Committee, a sophomore at Smith College. She's one of your own, Hassani Turner. And of course, again, for Professor Cornel West of Princeton University. Hassani, I'm going to do this a little different than I've done all the other panels. There's so much stuff, good stuff, that was put out in these two presentations by both Aaron and Cornel. Let me just give you a chance to share some of your initial thoughts, and you can kick off what will be roughly 30 minutes of interaction with this audience. Young people, get to the mics right quick because we're going to be really tight on time here. I know many of you have questions and comments you want to ask of Aaron and Professor West and Hassani, so please get to those microphones, and I'm coming there in just a second with your questions and comments. Hassani, why don't you share some of your initial thoughts, and that you can kick off this conversation in that way.
First, I'd like to say that this is an absolute honor to be on this panel of distinguished gentlemen. I am so pleased and happy. Aaron stated that the media is a powerful tool, and that statement is very true and very important. One thing that I saw this summer was a movie called Bowling for Columbine by a man named Michael Moore. And if you haven't seen it, it's very important that you see that movie. One thing that he does is he questions the media's use of fear throughout America and how America views black people as a result. And if the media uses fear to show a particular side of what blackness is supposed to be and what blackness represents, and the media is a powerful tool, then where does our mobility lie? And so one thing that we must do, and one reason why this conference is so essential, is that we must take our mobility for ourselves. If there is a certain image that is being articulated and it doesn't equate to what we represent, then we must show our image by ourselves.
Let me ask you how it is you think that your generation can hold the media accountable. I just want your thoughts and move to this audience. I'm not trying to put all the pressure on you, but Aaron talked about changing how the media does what they do. And it's a high mark, it's a high watermark to be certain, but how do you think your generation can best hold the media accountable for the image that is so often, too often portrayed of your generation?
Well, one thing that Aaron McGruder does that I notice is that he constantly questions contemporary culture.
Oh, you noticed that, huh?
Yeah, definitely. But at the same time, he supports a black politic, and that's one thing that we should do. We should constantly question who we are and what we represent and how we're being represented. And this is one thing that this conference is doing, is we are redefining who we are and what we represent.
On the flip side of that question, do you think that there are things, or is there something you think that these folk in your generation you can do to utilize the media to get your message across?
Well, definitely getting involved in the media. One thing that I've done this summer is I worked for MTV News, and I was definitely in there with the Choose or Lose campaigns, the Fight for Your Rights campaigns, questioning what was going on, how can we get minorities involved, how can we get involved in the schools. So internships, getting your voice across, writing op-ed pieces, just making sure that your voice is heard.
I should mention before I go to Aaron for a comment and then to the audience, I mentioned that Hassani, as a sophomore at Smith College, and is part of the planning committee that organized this, as did Dr. West make that mention. There are some 26 young people from around the country who've gone through this leadership program at the Tavis Smiley Foundation, this Youth to Leaders program, 26 of them who were assembled to organize this conference so that every topic, every workshop, every speaker, every plenary session. So Dr. West and Aaron, you should know that I didn't want you here necessarily. I love you both. That didn't come out right. It's not that I didn't want you here, but the young people asked me to get you here. So they put together a list of everything they wanted and how they wanted it done. So it's 26 young people who actually planned this conference. Hassani is on that committee. I thought I better explain what I meant when I said the planning committee. But I digress on that point. I didn't mean to say, I love you, Aaron. What's your comment, my friend?
The important thing about when you're talking about the corporations that control the information is that, we can look at them, the 5 or 6 or how many of them there are, and we get frustrated, we get angry at them as corporations. But understand those corporations are made up of people. And some of those people are actually just like you and I. And the important thing is to not be so frustrated by the system that you just turn your back completely on the system, which is what so many young conscious people do. And they decide that the way they're going to make a difference, they're going to do their own thing, and no one ever sees it. The reality is that the Boondocks you only see because of corporations. When we do the TV show and the movie, you're going to see it because of Sony, you're going to see it because of Fox, you're going to see it with these same corporations that I'm critiquing right now, because you have to deal with the situation as is. You really, really do. Now, this is me speaking, it's not Huey. Huey would say something different. But I'm saying that, when you're talking about strategy, you got to deal with the hand that you're dealt and make the most of it. Michael Moore is a prime example. Michael Moore puts his books out. He's critiquing the same corporations that are publishing the books. And if they drop him, he goes to another corporation. And he's rich. So, Michael's a great example. You should see Bowling for Columbine, but understand, you don't have to just go outside the system. You can, but you can also make inroads in the system if you're smart.
All right, let me go to the audience. You know how this works. I need you to make your comments or your questions very brief. Work with me today. We're on a really tight schedule. C-SPAN is kind to stay with us and cover this session, this part of the program, rather. So let's make the best of it by getting as many questions and comments from as many young people as we can. We'll start here. Yes, sir. Give your name and school, your name and where you're from.
Anthony Harris, San Antonio, Texas, senior at East Central High School. Mr. McGruder has already spoken about how his message is, how he had to change the way he conveyed his message in order for it to come out. But my question is directed towards Dr. West about how have you had to alter your message or in order for us to understand it? And has it been compromised in any way, and do you feel upset about doing so? Also, one more thing, I'm giving you an opportunity to plug, because I'm watching on Bill Maher, and I was give me an opportunity to plug your book. I hear you have a new book out, Mr. McGruder, and I'm wondering what it is and when it's coming out and all that.
We'll let Dr. West speak first.
That's kind of him to give you an opportunity
very
to
great.
plug your book.
Thank you.
We appreciate that,
I'll
young
send you a
man.
royalty check. Thank you very much.
How kind of you, sir. All right, Cornel, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate the question, though, brother. Just very briefly, that I had decided a long time ago to aspire to greatness in the form of being a servant that tries to tell the truth. When you love people, you hate injustice. When you hate injustice, you try to tell the truth about the causes of the injustice so that it can be overcome. And I try to do that in the context of the university. Try to do that in the context of the studio. Try to do that in the context of film. Try to do that in the context of the streets, the church, the mosque, the temple, the synagogue, the street corner, even at the nightclub to give me a little chance, you know. So that whatever context, you become multi-contextual because of your one vocation of being a truth teller and an exposer of lies and trying to bear witness in one's own imperfect way.
Aaron?
Real quick on the issue of compromise, you know, don't confuse compromise with strategy. You know, you make the decisions you have to make in order to get your message out to the widest number of people to do the greatest good. Now, that's a constant decision. It's a constant process of self-censoring, of being checked by others, because you want to stay in those mediums. And my challenge is always to be truthful and honest while maintaining my client list. Because without the client list, nobody knows who I am. Nobody reads what I'm saying. Since you're going to force me, the new book is called A Right to Be Hostile. It comes out the last week of September, first week in October. And there you go.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Samuel Flemings, and I'm a sophomore at Florida A&M University, and I bring you greetings from Philadelphia. It's been said that in order to be a leader, one must lead by example. Now, we were talking about the news. In the past and the present, our celebrities, sport athletes, and even leaders have been made an example of by being spotlighted for doing wrong, committing acts of adultery, and even committing major or minor offenses. How supportive, as leaders, how supportive, forgiving, and even sympathetic do you expect the public to be when news drops that puts their moral character into question?
Well, I mean, look, I don't expect anyone to be perfect. I do expect people to be a little smart. I don't feel sorry for people who are just really stupid. I'm not perfect. No one here is going to claim to be perfect. You know, we all make our mistakes, and certainly, you know, we all going to have a time we're going to ask for forgiveness. But if you're not trying to help yourself, if you're not smart enough to make basic decisions for your own well-being, I have a real hard time investing energy to help you. That's just me. And that covers not just athletes, but a lot of things.
I think it's important to keep in context what we mean by crimes, you see. That the kind of thing that Kobe Bryant or R. Kelly and so forth, these are things that warrant some attention, but the crimes that we see perpetrated by the White House, Wall Street, the corporations, these things are tremendous weight and gravity that we downplay. Now, I happen to be a Christian. I'm proud to be a Christian, and therefore I believe in forgiveness across the board. You know, I don't like revenge. I love justice, and I take forgiveness seriously because we all fall short. So I pray for Brother Kobe. I pray for R. Kelly. I pray for all the folk falling short. I hope somebody's praying for me because I'll fall short. But I also want people to take responsibility. That's why I do agree with Aaron there. I think Aaron might be a little bit harsher on him in terms of stupidity. See, stupidity is something that I actually embrace as something to overcome, but I know there's always an element of stupidity in anything I do. You see what I mean? So that I still want others to forgive me, even if I do something stupid. Right. But that's just my Christian view about this thing. But we need to be loving in our critique. I tried to do that with R. Kelly in my talk. You see what I mean? I'm not going to let him get off the hook. Those sisters are human beings. But I also love the brother, partly because of his genius and also because he's a child of God.
Yeah. Two things. One, they are still, as we all know, presumed innocent until proven guilty. Let's just say that, number one, for the record. And number two, Cornel, if it makes you feel better, I am praying for you.
Oh, I appreciate
There you go. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm Jonna Riley. I go to Lincoln Prep in Kansas City, Missouri. And my question is, we always see the negative images on the news, and they always show the people, African American men mainly, and also women going to jail, how do we get the positive things that we as youth like us here, how do we get those shown on our local news and on a national level?
It's a good question. First of all, you do it by thanking C-SPAN again for carrying this right now. Let's do that, number one. And number two, Hassani, Aaron, Cornel.
I just say having more events like this, articulating your viewpoints through writing news stations, and also through your money, and that's by watching positive images of Black people, just voicing your opinions and letting them know how you feel and showing them that, hey, you are a consumer and you have a voice.
What Hassani's raising is the issue of selective purchasing, selective buying, selective viewing. That's what Dr. King and those in the movement talked about years ago. In that regard, the strategy has not changed. You support the people who support you. If they don't do right by you, you don't do right by them. And so we've got to start making, back to what Aaron talked earlier about, some tough choices. You got to have the courage and the conviction and, most importantly, the commitment to make the right decision to support the right people and stick with that until they do right by you. But it means making choices and not willy-nilly spending your money and offering support to people who really don't deserve it. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. My name is Lalade Babalola from Pensacola, New Jersey. The issue of getting sensitive information through the media has been brought up before, and people have suggested that we should maybe read newsletters from other nations through the internet, so maybe we can see how other countries view America. So my question is directed to Mr. McGruder. How else do you feel that we can get real information through the media about our people?
That was nice for her. She called you Mr. McGruder.
Oh, I know. I'm getting old. I'm getting old. The problem with the internet is, you know, it's a million voices screaming into the darkness. You don't know who you can believe and who you can't. The problem with the mainstream media is that you know you can't believe them. So this question comes up a lot, which is, well, who can you trust? This is why history is so important. Because when you have a true understanding of history, then you can look at what's going on in the world, you can look at the lies they're telling you and read between the lines and get a good grip of what the truth probably is. The reality is there's no easy way to acquire the truth. There's no website I can give you, there's no author I can give you to read. That's why the understanding and knowledge of history is so important, because, you know, anybody can lie and anybody can deceive you.
Cornel, you're an academic. In terms of what it occurs to me, obviously, that you're teaching students every day, and your role is that of a truth teller. If one of your students were asking you this, what would you say to them about how they go about establishing that what you're saying, what anybody else is saying to them, is truth?
Well, I do think that there are certain views that are better than other views. So that, for example, if you're reading Noam Chomsky, as opposed to Neil Ferguson, Noam Chomsky strikes me as more persuasive. You all know Noam Chomsky, the towering intellectual, writes about U.S. foreign policy? Write his name down.
Gore Vidal, too.
Gore Vidal, he's got some truths to tell.
Michael Moore.
Michael Moore, the sister from India, Arundhati Roy, R-O-Y, and they have some deep truths to tell. He's got text.
That's for me.
Oh, that's for the thing. I thought you was showing Chomsky's book. But so that I do think that there are certain authors and certain viewpoints that are better than others, but we must be skeptical. That's part of what the Socratic orientation is all about. And we must be supportive of the folk who are being critical. You see, I think Dead Prayers ought to be a bestseller. I think Kindred ought to be a bestseller. Why? Because they are speaking truths that people need to come to terms with. And if you don't support them, then they can easily become marginal, and the mainstream becomes, 50 Cent, anybody who's out there with something to say. That doesn't cut too deep. I don't want to put 50 Cent down, but compared to Dead Prayers, he's not weighty. Not in terms of his weight, but in terms of what he got to say. You see, I know y'all got quiet when I said that because you like him. God bless the brother. Dead Prayers got more to say about what we're talking about.
Real quick, also, take comfort in the fact that a lot of the lies they're telling are not that hard to figure out. It doesn't take, a rudimentary knowledge of history. You don't even have to get deep, because they are assuming you have no knowledge of history, because most Americans don't.
Over here.
Hi, my name is Shannon Sharp, and I'm from Columbus, Ohio. And I wanted to speak on what Mr. McGruder, he was saying that 90% of the media industry is controlled by 10 people. What would you say would be the best advice for us to try to take back some of the 90%, like immediately, so we could get our face on there and have a positive image out?
That's one. Someone's got to figure out a way to get the Nazis out of the White House.
Ouch.
I mean, that's a huge problem. But however you got to do it, whether you got to make a whole lot of money so you can buy some senators, look at how the system works. Look at how other people control the government and do what they do. One thing that you have to respect about the right wing is that they will steal, lie, cheat, and murder to maintain power. They do it because that's how the game of international and global politics is played. The problem is what they're lying, cheating, stealing, and killing for. But, understand that this is not a nice game. It's ugly. If you're talking about really getting into the game of power and you're not willing to do whatever it takes, you don't need to get into the game. Al Gore won the election and is not president because he was not willing to do what it took, and Bush was. So, if you be prepared to get your hands real dirty if you're really trying to change things. And again, look at how they do it, because they're winning and we're not. And, keep your moral center as best you can, but understand that, look, revolutions, if looking at a place like Cuba, you got a guy like Che, who's an idealist, and you got a guy like Fidel, who's kind of a gangster. And it really does take both. The idealists usually die young, but inspire generations that come after. The gangsters live to run countries.
Over here, to my left.
Hi, I'm Brandon Middleton from Chicago.
Chicago.
Chi-Town, I see you. My question would be two questions, actually. Is the image of black people now, or our younger generation, worse than what you would say it was back in Dr. King's day, how the white people saw the black people? And two, as black people are getting more intelligent and moving forward, how hard would the struggle be once we're knowledgeable to take that 90% over? What steps should we take, and how hard will that be? Will the struggle be?
I can only assume that question is meant for Dr. West, since he's the only one who was around with Dr. King.
Oh, brother, that's a profound question, though, man. Because I would argue that the image is basically the same. The white supremacist image of black people as hypersexual and hypercriminal was around since the first African stepped off a slave ship. You see, the difference is that our black communities and black institutions are weaker. So our black family, the black church, the black mosque, the black synagogue, the black network in music, the apprenticeship networks and athletics, they're weaker, so that those vicious images are more internalized among black youth because the armor is weaker. If you don't have a strong armor to deal with white supremacist bombardment, then you will end up viewing yourself through the images of the racist stereotypes that are perpetrated in the society.
Cornel, let me jump in right quick, because I think somebody in this room may not understand how it is that you argue that our institutions are weaker. As black folk have made more progress, as we make more money, as we have more education, we are doing better now. To be sure, racism is still real. For my money, still the most intractable issue in America. But as we have progressed over the years with more of this and more of that, how does one argue to these young people that our institutions in that process have become weaker?
Well, we know the family is much weaker. Divorce rate stronger. More the brothers drifting. The mothers overworked and underpaid, trying to keep track of the kids themselves in quest of their own forms of intimacy that makes it difficult for them to preserve their sanity. Y'all know what I'm talking about? This is real. So you can have all the material toys in the world, but if the love's not there, the care's not there, the attention's not there, you still got a problem. And you end up addicted to what? Television, drugs, sex, anything coming along to give you some sense of transcendence from your pain. So we're wrestling with this pain, especially younger generation. For young folk to have to wrestle with this pain, it's much more difficult because you're younger, you're more inexperienced in this regard. And you do what? You tend more to being shaped by both mass media and your peers. And of course, the gang culture is just one way of socializing folk into a certain kind of love connection, but it's linked to some criminality. So that I think your question is deep. I couldn't fully, adequately respond to it, but I think the images are the same, but our institutions are weaker, and therefore we have more work to do.
Over here.
Good morning, fellow leaders and members of the panel. My name is Fred Schultz, and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And my question is, are there specific steps that we can take to institutionalize laws that can redefine the limits of the media and begin to show specific positive images that we can portray?
Aaron, I have seen Huey and Riley talking about this FCC stuff in the strip. You want to talk about that?
I remember the limits of my job. I just tell jokes. But look, I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic. Are there steps you can take to get Colin Powell's son to break the monopolies? No. They are stronger than you are now. That's why I say look long term at how the right wing does what it does. It involves money, it involves power, it involves connections that are built up over many, many, many years. But be serious about your money, not for the cars and not for the homes, but because money is how is the currency of power in America. It's a capitalist society. Buy a senator, but that's expensive. You know, congressman maybe a little cheaper. A presidency is, you know, really expensive. But, you know, I don't know if there's any other way to break the corporations and break the monopolies and to make the FCC bend. Remember that you no longer, like, I'm so glad Dr. West said it, you no longer live in a democracy. So first step is get rid of that illusion that you can somehow vote your way into breaking a corporate stranglehold on media. That's never going to happen. You have to do it another way.
Now, you know I get a lot of hate mail for letting Aaron McGruder come to my foundation and speak to a room full of 1,000 black youth and telling them they no longer live in democracy. I can hear my phones at my office ringing right now.
Right, but I'm not the only one that said it. He said it too. Empire is an empire. You can be a democracy, you can be an empire, you can't be both at the same time. You can't.
We got democratic energy in the empire so that we can create some possibilities, but we can't be naive and think that the democracy is healthy and working well in an imperial context. That's the thing.
Over here.
Good morning. My name is Adrian. I'm from Arlington, Virginia. And, well, I got a comment because a young lady said that why most of the times that there's a comment in the news is always bad. There's nothing good about, like, black folk community or any kind of race. There's the news are always bad. Even though some good happens, they'll put it in the news because people want to know what happened to black community or any kind of community, and it's always something bad about them. There's nothing positive about it.
Let me turn that into a question. Why is that? Why is it that every single thing on the media about children of color, young people of color, happens to be negative?
Well, she mentioned Bowling for Columbine, which is why it's so important to see that movie, because he delves into this question. And the basic idea is, if you get teased with a news story saying, you know, the air you're breathing might kill you, film at 11, you're going to watch. And that's about money. That's about scaring you into watching. And, I mean, all these terror alerts is scaring you into not only watching the news, but scaring you into doing whatever the government tells you to do. Fear is a very, very powerful manipulative tool, and it is being used to excess at this point in history. Propaganda, fear, all this stuff. I mean, to me, that's what it is.
And I think also there's a fear of the power of young black people. That young black people have created the most powerful culture, hip-hop, the most powerful music, rap in the last 35 years, and that's from the street, that's from the block, you see? That's tremendous power, that's spiritual power. That's creative power, that's musical power, that is now an empire, economic empire around the world. So there's a deep fear that you all have so much power you don't even recognize, you don't even realize it. They fear your intelligence, they fear your creativity, they fear your imagination. And the question is to exercise it in such a way that it aspires to greatness and doesn't fall into these ugly traps of racist stereotypes.
I got 4 people, 2 on this side, 2 on this side. I'm going to try to get to all 4 of you in 5 minutes. Give me a quick question. We'll get a quick response. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Good morning. My name is John Marsh. I'm a delegate from the Mighty Fourth Region. And my question is...
Mighty Fourth Region? Which region is that, though, bro?
That's Michigan and Ohio.
Oh, all right.
And my question is quite simple. Each panelist, please take a stab at it. I want to know how each of you identify your purpose in life. There was some discussion on that earlier this week, so please share that.
A very good question. Give me the short version of how you discovered what your purpose in life was, Dr. West. How did you figure it out?
Oh, when I converted to Christian faith, I decided to love my way through the darkness, to leave with some kind of witness so that when people recognize me, they say that he's doing his best and thinking and loving.
Asani?
It's kind of hard to articulate my purpose. I'm 18 years old, so I haven't quite figured that out. But one thing that I'm dedicated to right now is the political and economical mobilization of marginalized people, specifically youth.
Aaron?
I think I figured out my purpose somewhere between Matrix 1 and Matrix 2. Which is to unplug as many people as I can from the system.
Over here.
That's nice.
What's up, everybody? My name is Charles Huggins, and I go to Southside High School in Atlanta, Georgia. And before the dude who do the comments, I want to know what did it take for you to get your comments in the newspaper?
We may have to talk about that because that's a long story. I'm sure all the audience at C-SPAN doesn't want to hear the boring details of being a syndicated cartoonist. But if you come up to me afterwards, we will discuss that.
Aaron and Dr. West are going to stick around for a few minutes afterwards, and he can answer that question off mic. Yes, ma'am.
Sharina, I'm from Washington, D.C., and I just wanted to say that since there's there aren't any positive images of black people on television, do you think that since the only ones on there that are negative, do you think that black people are so hungry to see other black people on television that we'll just watch anything?
Aaron, you have been deaf on TV and movies starring black people. Why don't you answer that?
Okay, real quick. I don't think all the images of black people on television are bad. I think most of them are bad. To the second question, yes, we will watch anything. That's the short answer.
There's the short answer. Over here, last question.
My name is Tiffany, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn.
And I heard that there's a new ruling that allows companies to have more power over the media. How would that affect our ability to redefine our image on television?
It's going to be harder.
Very hard.
Go ahead.
I mean, that's, you know,
and it's not just
it was
television.
hard before, and it's going to be real hard now.
Cornel?
It's not just television, but it's radio. You see, when I was coming along, we could hear quality music on the radio.
Yeah.
We heard Marvin Gaye, we heard the Isley Brothers, we heard Curtis Mayfield on the radio. The radio nowadays is so flattened out, and you hear the same songs every 19 minutes, every 19. You say, what about all of this talent? All the talent in young black American, young white American, young red American, young yellow American. You mean to tell me that's all they can produce is what's on the radio? No, it's because there's a monopoly of the radio stations that through various networks don't allow great music, so you end up with a music industry over here and a recording industry over here, and the radio concerned only with the recording industry. And it's a small slice of those, you see.
And you know, we're not just talking about, you know, the Roots and Most Def. Prince can't get on the radio.
No, geniuses like Prince.
Prince.
That's right.
He can't get on the radio.
Stevie Wonder.
Yes.
He can't get on the radio. They ought to shut the whole system down.
Well, you know, right now music has been, like I said, there's been 13 years of gangster rap. Why? Because when something is allowed to change and evolve, it is unpredictable. That means you can't predict profits. Black culture has been held down and raped like a woman. It has not been allowed to move, change, run, grow, anything.
And that's very serious business, because that's the greatest tradition among black people. So when our music is low quality, our souls are low quality, our spirits are low quality, we can't love, we can't reach out, we can't be in solidarity.
And it's a question of balance. Look, I really like Jay-Z. I do. Jay-Z's incredibly talented.
And I like Beyonce.
I like Beyonce. But the issue is not those guys. The issue is that there are other people that are preventing other voices from being heard, so that there's no balance. When I was in high school, there was balance. We had De La, we had Tribe, we had NWA. We listened to all of it, we loved all of it. Now someone else is determining what you are allowed to hear.
let me do this. I want to give each and every one of our panelists a brief opportunity to share their final thought. And what I would like to do is to say, to get each of you to address the issue of why, in fact, it is that you remain hopeful. I know that Asani Turner is not here. I know that Aaron McGruder is not here. I know that Cornel West is not here. Absent of a reason to believe, absent of some hope. So let me start with you, Aaron, and tell me why it is that despite all the challenges that this generation faces around these media issues, social, political, and economic issues, why it is, in fact, that you, even as a 20-year-old, in your 20s, remain hopeful about your future and about their future.
Look, you know, when I created the strip, all conventional wisdom said it would never be seen, and I personally thought it would never be seen. And the fact that I can look at what I do and see its distribution, see its reach, see the things that I've been able to accomplish in the context of what I'm saying and how strongly it opposes, you know, what the government is saying, what the media is telling you. And I've found a way to use these same mainstream channels to get a different voice through does give me hope. You know, I can't say everything is terrible, because if it was, I wouldn't be here. I would not have a career. So clearly, things are possible. It's just a question of finding the right way to go about it.
Let's thank the creator of the Boondocks, Aaron McGruder, for being here today. Thank you, Aaron. Asani, you're 18. You're just getting started. You got to remain hopeful. So tell me why it is that you are hopeful about your future.
I remain hopeful because I didn't necessarily come from a situation of privilege, and yet I've had so much access through the Tavis Smiley Foundation, through the institution that I had the ability to go through, and through reading books like Race Matters and reading Aaron McGruder's comic strip. The ability to be enlightened and the ability to share it with so many of my peers has kept me hopeful.
Thank Asani Turner for organizing this conference, along with her peers, and for being on the panel today. Last but not least, Dr. West, I'll save you for last because you have some deep perspective on this, and I want to give you an opportunity to share the final word with these young people about the possibility and the hope of their future.
Well, first, I want to say again, I want to salute each and every one of them, but important thing to keep in mind is hope is inseparable from despair. He or she who has never despaired has never lived. That's what Goethe said. The question is trying to wrestle with your despair so you don't get locked into it. You will despair, but you don't want to get locked into it. Hope is trying to hold that despair at bay. That's what the blues is, right? The blues is what? Music to hold the blues at bay. Right? You're feeling blue, sing the blues. It holds the blues at bay. It's a sad and sweet indictment of the despair. And as long as there is a precious baby of whatever color who's got beaming eyes and a lovely grin and smile, how can we give in to despair? That is the future. And thank God that people did not give up on us when we came along as young folk. And that's part of the great tradition that you all can be a part of if you aspire to greatness. Thank you very much. God bless each and every one of you.
Please stand to your feet and give all of these panelists a real youth to leaders. Thank you for being here for this discussion. You can take your seats. I believe C-SPAN 1, number one, C-SPAN is about to leave us right now. And I believe that later this afternoon on C-SPAN, there will be the final mega session covered live on C-SPAN this afternoon. I believe somewhere around 4:15 Eastern, a discussion, a provocative discussion with these young people who are obviously at the center of the debate in this country about affirmative action in higher education and beyond. So that will be coming forth, I believe, later this afternoon, somewhere around 4:15 Eastern on C-SPAN, a discussion about that. Thanks, C-SPAN, as they leave us one more time for covering this session. For those who, I know that I'm going to get a couple of pictures. I believe that Aaron and Dr. West are going to stay around just for a few minutes here in just a moment. moment before you leave here to go to your sessions. That's number one. It's got to be very quick. I know how you young people are, and I know you want to talk to them, and they love that, and you love it, and we all love it. But we're a little bit late for your sessions, but I thought it'd be important to give you a chance to see these two historic figures, the first brother to do what he's doing with a cartoon strip, and the Du Bois of our time, Dr. West. I didn't want to cut that short, so facilitators, forgive me, running a little bit behind. So young people, please make your way. Don't move yet, don't move, because we got a couple of announcements, as usual. After the announcements, I need you to move as quickly, take your seats, as quickly and as expeditiously to your sessions as possible. Having said that, let me ask the panelists to exit stage right, Snagglepuss. Exit stage right. I'm sorry. Who's doing the announcements? Is that Mia? Who is this? Oh, yeah, Monique, I can see. Please welcome Monique Hutcherson with the announcements. Monique?
Okay. For the Youth Ventures people, your lunch is in room 321. Checkout for all students is at 10 o'clock. Chaperones are on duty this morning and team leaders are on duty this afternoon. Lunch for team leaders and chaperones is at 12:45. It's in the third floor cafeteria. Also, for students who are going on class tours, we want to make sure that you all get to the buses. They leave at 10:15 and at 2. And the buses will be outside presently.
Can we go now? Yes. They ain't gonna leave, y'all.
Coming up in a moment, our series on rebuilding Iraq, followed by another chance to see Cornel West and Aaron McGruder, and a discussion on federal sentencing guidelines. Tomorrow here on C-SPAN 2, a speech on liberty.